Welcome back to Insight Club, and today we're talking about the assumptions we make around freedom. Stay tuned.
The first rule of Insight Club is you don't talk about Insight Club. You do Insight Club. The second rule of Insight Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Insight Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Insight Club.
This time, the word that came to me was, what is happiness for each person?
Yeah. If we assume everybody wants happiness, what is happiness? Yeah.
What does it mean? Because we're talking about freedom, and I feel like freedom is a big element in happiness. But that's for me. Is it for everyone? Because I know that there are people that feel like even threatened by freedom, and I can see points where I can feel threatened about that as well. I know people, and you, I'm sure you know as well, that would prefer to say like, "Tell me what I need to do, and I'll just do it." It's easier than having to figure things out because freedom can feel really loose as
Yeah.
well. And I'm bringing this up because you asked about what we're living right now and the moment that we are, and we are in a moment planetary and also with the solar flares and so on, where the sun is in its maximum. We're having heat waves here in Brazil that are way above 100 Fahrenheit, which is crazy. And even though we are a very hot uh, country in comparison with European countries and so on, it's still a little bit too much for here.
Yeah. We're having unseasonably warm weather as well. I mean, it should not be like coming into spring, we should still be getting snow and where it's like in the mid 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, there are five luminaries, planets, and sun, moon. Today it's a new moon, and they're all aligned in Pisces, like doing a planetary parade in the sky. You can look at it today, except Neptune you won't be able to see because it's unless you have
A
something to,
telescope.
yeah, telescope,
Yeah.
because it's further. But yeah, all the planets on that side. um Pisces is very like expansive in the sense of like really uniting with all. It's really related to spirituality, but also the subconscious and the fears and so on. All these things are being amplified with that. It's a new moon, not a full moon, which usually the full moon we would think more of that amplification of things, but it's Pisces. Pisces will amplify everything. It is just like Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter in the old tradition as well. So it is big, it is amplifying, it is losing the boundaries. It's really the connection with all, but it also is the subconscious. It also brings the fears and so on. And because all of these planets are there, there's a lot of energy on that side. There's amplification of those energies, amplification of the confusion as well, because Pisces and Neptune in there as well do bring that fog of like, it's a moment for us to decide what we want, to think of our dreams, but at the same time it's not going to be clear right now. So what we really need to ask is for the wisdom and the clarity of how to move ahead with that discernment, with that connection with spirit and so on, and with the solar flares being the way they are, all of this increased inflammation as well. increase the heat, the fire that we were mentioning. And we are both just talking before we got here that we were having more inflammation in our bodies as well. I believe this is a point where we really need to take care of our vehicles, of our bodies, because we are readjusting to a new reality. And if we don't take care, things get harder. Things are getting more subtle. Pisces is that intuition, that subtle frequencies, and so on. And if we stay too much on the ground, on the material, on the more heavy energies, we're going to suffer more through the transition.
Yeah. Well, I think there's an interesting, thank you so much for sharing that and like grounding us. And it's always, I mean, it's always so nurturing for me to hear, oh, this is what's going on, right? I'm not the only one feeling this way, or there's a reason I am feeling this way. There's a reason I'm having increased allergies and inflammations, and just feeling that, like that impact, that swelling. And I think there's a link here between what you were saying about the Pisces energy and the dissolution and the discomfort with that, and then also the discomfort around happiness and freedom. Because I think one of the things that makes both of those states feel scary is that we go, okay, I'm in charge, and so I have to be the one to choose the best thing. And we are very acculturated to following somebody else's plan. Like having a job means I'm putting my time and energy into work that somebody else has mapped out and said, like, we have this project, these are the steps to get it completed, this is your job, this is your role. And we're like, okay, great, I'm part of a system, I'm part of doing something. And even outside of work, just so many things that we do to make our daily life happen. Like, okay, I'm supposed to go to the grocery store and buy groceries and cook food, right? It's like there are these patterns and systems that exist outside of us, that other people have created either intentionally or they've just kind of like come to be this way, right? And so when we're participating in those, it's not on us to try to make the best choice. Now, the reason I'm seeing this connection is that if I take a different, so it feels very scary if freedom and happiness are like, I have to know what the best thing is for me. I have to know it. Oh crap, I don't know it. Somebody else please tell me what to do. But if we would like dance a little more with that Pisces energy and say, I don't need to know. I need to listen. Like happiness and freedom will come from I listen, and then there's like one next thing and one next thing. And we talk about this all the time. I mean, you and I talk about it, but in the world, this is a conversation that happens all the time. It's all over the self-development and coaching space. And it's so hard to actually do. It's the advice that everybody gives us, like, just listen for that one next thing and feel into it. And that for me, like the Pisces energy is the emptiness that creates space for me to listen for what that one next thing is.
That's already my insight, because yes, because that emptiness is the thing that we need to learn how to deal with, and people don't know how to deal with the void. We're always trying to find something to fill that void, because that's the discomfort. That's where we feel like, I don't know, I need to know the unknown. That emptiness that we all feel, and the only way we can complete it is through connection, is the thing that makes us dissociate, is the thing that makes us seek for some kind of distraction to fill the void, and not have to fill the void.
Yes. And I feel like there's an interesting link there to inflammation, because so this wacky thing happens to me where when I'm eating, and I mean just in general, when my like food, television consumption, sleep patterns, when all those things are not the way my body wants them, my toes swell up. It's this very consistent thing. They are like the first warning sign, right? And it'll be like this one and then this one, and then they're all swollen. And so what's literally happening in my body is all the space is being filled up by fluid, or whatever it is, the white blood cells. So I'm literally pushing out the void and the space. Right, filling it up. There's a season that happens in the United States called Girl Scout cookie season, when the Girl Scout troops for a fundraiser sell their cookies, which are very delicious. And so anytime you go, to like a shopping center, so there are 9-year-old kids with big smiles like, do you want to buy our cookies? Oh, of course I do. Right, it's like, and that's it's not the only reason I'm eating a lot of sugar right now, but it's like this this filling up any empty spaces, and my body literally swelling up, and there's no room for whatever is meant to be happening. So it's a brilliant, like I am the walking metaphor.
Yes. It's so interesting. That's disgusting what I'm going to share, but I have a similar thing, and I can notice in myself every time that I get into that mode of filling the void with distractions, uh, that I get constipated, which is the same thing. Like I'm overly consuming and not processing enough,
Yeah.
not being able to let go
Yeah.
of the things enough. And it's not even over consuming food. Even when I'm overly consuming content, for example,
Yeah.
that happens, which our body doesn't know the difference if you're consuming something that is material, or if you're consuming too much in your mind. It's
Yeah.
still going to be like overly stimulated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we found a really interesting TV series, and I've just been like, but it's, we've been watching it, and then it's really intense. And so I need like something to cool down. So then we've been watching like a funny show afterwards. I have been consuming so much television the last few weeks and just lying on the couch, and I feel it, I'm not getting restful sleep. And it's just, I mean, it's one of those times where I'm kind of standing next to myself observing. I'm doing it and I'm observing. I'm like, okay, I don't think this will last forever. I think at a certain point I'll say enough is enough. But this, I think, takes us into that freedom piece as well, because there's the draw of, this is a really interesting series, I want to watch it, we're spending time together and we're engaged with this. There's also the feeling of, I get to do whatever I want. If I want to stay up late watching TV, I'm going to do that. If I want to eat Girl Scout cookies while I'm doing it, I'm going to do that too. So like when we had this initial conversation about freedom, what came to mind for me is, who is the I who wants this? Because there's a little girl inside of me who equates sugar with a lot of really, really big stuff. Safety, but also like, I mean, like freedom in the sense of not being told what to do and being able to follow like my own path. But it's a corruption, because the way for me, real freedom would be doing something that's in alignment with my values. So freedom is like a very small example would be like, I go outside whenever I want to. So for me, if I were working in an office building and I were being told, no, you have to stay inside and you have to stay at your computer, like for me, that would be a really awful infringement on freedom. Like that's the ability to just walk outside, to be in the sun, to bask, to take that break. That's a freedom, that's a desire aligned with my values, versus I would stay up late watching TV and eating cookies. So, like, there are some things that we experience as freedom because they're kind of rebellion against somebody telling us what to do. But the I who wants it isn't the I who's aligned with our values. It might be a wounded I, it might be a child I who, like, I didn't get my needs met, and so now I'm gonna go get my needs met, you know. So, like, just to psychoanalyze myself for a moment, for me, the experience of growing up in a household where there was a lot of healthy food and my parents made the choice not to buy junk snack food, when we would go to the grocery store and I would go, I want this, I want this, and they would say no. I didn't understand it was because the foods they weren't buying were poisonous. You know, for me, it was, I'm not being heard and you're not taking me seriously.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm gonna go buy those junk foods because now I'll be taken seriously, right? And so that's something to heal and be aware of, right? And some, it's funny because, like, some, I've heard money coaches, money mindset coaches advise people, go buy the thing that your younger self would have wanted, right? Like, you really wanted that toy and nobody bought it for you, go buy it. I'm like, I wonder if that's healing, or I wonder if that's perpetuating the pain.
Yeah. But that points to how important it is, even for the clarity of what that higher part of us want, the knowing of why.
Yeah.
Like, why I'm making a choice. For example, for me, we're talking about the food freedom in here, like eating whatever I want. Or one thing that we talked about as well, like, is freedom like eating whatever I want or doing whatever I want. Or for someone else, freedom might be um, eating the things that make me feel good with myself, or waking up early because then I have all the freedom to do all the things that I want to do in the morning while nobody is ringing on my phone, for example. That's different kinds of freedom for different people, and there's a why behind it. So for me, for example, I had that rebellious side of, like, I was told that, oh, you shouldn't be eating this and this, or shouldn't be eating too much because you're going to get fat and all those things. And feeling like, I don't care about that. I just want to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But at the point where I noticed that not eating sugar, not eating processed food, was making me feel better and have more energy to do all the things that I do want to do and have all the freedom that I do want to have, and less of the physical limitations that I was putting on myself, then that was a why, true reason for me to want to limit my sugar consumption and not eat processed foods. So the why was what made me decide on what was freedom for me on that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that's part of the conversation around, like, who is the I who wants it, right? It's the I who goes, "Wait, I have all of these really exciting projects I wanna be doing in the world." I mentioned to you this over the week, like, I drank too much cheap wine over the weekend and woke up with, like, the worst hangover, and I was just having you know, this observation and going, if I get a cold, if I feel sick, I have that feeling of panic sometimes where it's like, will I never feel better? What if I never get my full energy back? And this is a reality, for the viruses that are going around now. But it's like, what if I never get my full energy back and I'm not able to participate in my life the way I want to? And that's such a big fear for me, a lot around mental cloudiness, especially. It's like, what if I never have the mental energy and the mental capacity again to write the books I want to and teach the classes and do the things? And so as I'm, like, going through my day, just, feeling really rough, I was like, I did this to myself. Why? you know, like, how is this in alignment? And I can absolutely track it back to, and this is the insidious thing about alcohol, right? It's like, the more we have, the more it convinces us that it's not our goals that are important, but it's goals that are important, right? Where it's like, oh, but you should keep having more, and you should keep having more, and you should keep having more. And that feeling of rebellion coming up.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what to do.
And the fact that it's socially acceptable to a certain level.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It
But
makes it easy.
yeah, but for me, this really, it's like, it's this conversation with the rebellious part of me who's like trying to be heard and who's going, I'll show you, you can't tell me what to do. Like, I know that that's the conversation happening. And so then the next day to, be feeling like really terrible and going, who is the I here who's getting their freedom? Because it's not the Megan who wants to, do big, exciting things in the world. And so the other conversation that brought up, and you mentioned about like getting up earlier in the morning, is what seems like a conflict between freedom and routine, or freedom and regiment. But really, like that regularly and committedly doing the things that we know support us physically and spiritually and emotionally, doesn't that give us the real freedom, which is then we have the capacity, the mental capacity, the spiritual capacity, the energetic capacity to do what we want to do. And now maybe those things are all looped together, right? Because coming back to what you said towards the beginning, there's such a fear around happiness and there's such a fear around freedom. So all of these very convenient forms of numbing, yes, there's a lot of stress in life right now. I mean, there are a lot of things that we could absolutely worry about. And so I think that's one reason why we numb so much. But I think another part of the numbing is like, if I had, this happened to me just yesterday. I ended up with like unexpected free time in my day and had a little bit of overwhelm. Like, wait, but what would I want to do if I had extra time?
Yeah.
And so I ended up going for a walk and talking to myself and doing a little voice memo and kind of thinking about what would help me structure and plan my time. And I was like, I want to just make a list of things that I feel like I never have time to do, so that when that time comes up, I can do, like, I'm prepared. Because in the
I
face of
actually,
free time,
I actually have,
I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. What's the best thing I could work on? What would make the most of this time?
I actually have a list on my whiteboard of things to do when I have free time, both in input if I'm feeling that I want to receive something, output if I want to create something, and things to do in 10 minutes if it's just like a short.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Oh, I'm inspired by that. Okay.
I'll take a picture and send to you after the
Aw.
episode.
Yeah. Well,
We're gonna
that's
get into the show
that's an
notes.
insight for me too. I'm so glad you broke it down that way. Like, do I have energy for inputs or do I have energy for outputs? Because I generally just jump to outputs. What can I do? What can I create? But man, how many like
Books I
interesting.
want to read are songs that I haven't listened
Yes. Okay. So I think I'll structure my list that way. I really like that.
and actually I put in input as well, like the channeling, because I don't feel like channeling is output. I feel like it is output if I want to rant about something, like just put something that is inside of me out. But if I want to channel something, just let it flow through me, for me that's input.
Yeah. Ooh. Ooh, yeah, connecting in. That's a whole next level. But that feeling of I have to choose the best thing, the right thing, whatever that language is internally, I think is important for us to acknowledge and sit with, and then like bringing it back to this, the space that we're in right now. And for me, a new moon also feels like there's extra emptiness, right? So if, I mean, you were talking about the amplification. If Pisces is calling us toward emptiness and a new moon is also emptiness, it's like emptiness on emptiness.
It's the space to create. Like there's the void. We shouldn't fear the void. We should invite it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in any kind of judgment, because I have the same thing. Like, what do I do now? And you end up scrolling or
Yes.
checking messages, and taking somebody else's problem for you to solve instead of solve your own. All
Yeah.
those things are things that I do as well, like all the time. And then I get myself thinking, like just what you said, like what about my projects, what about my dreams? And that's what we need to focus on, not from right now, not from a place of lack, but from a place of what do I really want, and not the wounded child, not the wounded teen, not the rebellious version of us,
Yeah.
but that higher soul that came feeling like I get a chance to do something great in this lifetime.
Yeah. And maybe that takes some practice to listen to. Because there is there's performance anxiety in all of a sudden I have this free time. Oh my God, what do I want to do? And like, wow, I'm so used to ignoring my intuition. I'm so used to just taking on other people's projects or solving problems for other people or responding to messages, whatever it is, that the line's a little staticky. I might have to tune the dial a bit to get that clear connection and build that as a practice even. Um, so for me, that's a helpful reminder. The more often I plug in, the easier it is to get the messages. And if I go a long time between plugging, I don't know. I mean, like I'm doing my daily meditation, but it's been pretty wimpy. Because I don't know how to just like going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
And it's so like how just from a place of self-compassion, how would I expect to be able to tap into my really deep desires if I haven't created that pathway of listening?
Yeah. Actually, actually, that ties up with the freedom in a sense of Piscean energy, because we talked about the fact that Pisces is also that feeling of like wanting to numb, wanting to seek for that distraction, that being alcohol, drugs, scrolling, whatever it is, but also the spirituality on the other side. So if we think of freedom, not just from a point of I do whatever I want, or um, I'll have all this discipline and do the things that I have to be doing because that's the freedom. What if there's a middle way where we actually take the time to listen, just like you were saying, so that we have the freedom to do what we want, but from a place of presence, intuition, and guidance?
Yeah.
We have the input and the output, the input and the output, because Pisces is also the period of contemplation, of having that space. It's not just doing. Pisces is not doing. Pisces is just being and existing. There's a mosquito in here. Uh, being, which is he's probably doing whatever he wants as well. Uh,
I'm living my best life.
oh, it's that feeling of really just being one with all, and from that place of oneness that we seek, but it's so hard to stay in there in that space of samadhi, of total unity. Then we get to act in alignment. That's
Yeah.
actually we talked in another episode about the words of the year and so on, and I mentioned that samadhi would come back to me, and I got like, no, it's not just samadhi. I just realized that is, I'm probably going to butcher the word, but it would be Sahara samadhi, or Sahara samadhi, something like that. It's the J, but I'm not sure exactly the pronunciation, which is that state of total unity, but not from a place of being in a meditation, but from just living life in that presence.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up aligned, because that, after we were boxing on this topic and it was, kind of like uh settling and playing in my being a little bit more, I was like, freedom, like if I had to reduce it and distill it to something just very simple, what is it? And what came was like the ability to follow the path that feels aligned. And so, like, freedom is the ability to express love. It's
Mm.
the ability to feel in connection with the divine. And, I'm put in mind of all of the there are a lot of wise sayings around, you can imprison the person but their soul is still free, right? And
Yes.
there are even historical moments where we've seen this, right? Spiritual teachers or leaders who were imprisoned but kept their meditation practice going and felt. So it's like, if I'm able to live in alignment, and maybe it's just the input and the output, like receiving and transmitting the love that for me feels like the fabric of reality, that's freedom.
Yes. And actually, the that's the freedom that we seek and that we would seek. I was thinking about the fear of freedom, and based on what we were talking here, I was just thinking that maybe the fear of freedom comes from the fact that freedom is also having choice,
Yes.
being able to choose what we want and what we're going to do and so on. And having the choice when we are in that connection, that means you don't have to decide alone. You get to decide with the connection with all. But if you are in the void and you're avoiding the void into the distractions, then of course choice feels like a threat because you don't have a point of connection to choose. So all choices feel like, but if I choose this, I might go to the abyss. Or if I choose this, I might get burned. Or if I choose this, all
Yeah.
the choices feel like you're imprisoned into something. So it feels easier to just leave it open.
Yeah, and it becomes a mental process. Okay, so something hit me as you were talking. We started out with like assumptions around freedom. I think a huge assumption we make around freedom is that it's an individual experience as opposed to an experience of connection.
Yes.
and and then that trickles down, and so we get into these conversations around like, what are my freedoms versus your freedoms, and what if they can conflict? And there's a great episode of The Simpsons that I feel like just encapsulates this beautifully. It's the brother and sister, right? Bart and Lisa. And they're having a fight and the parents are like, stop fighting. And one of them is like, well, I'm just going to windmill my arms like this, and if you happen to walk into my space, that's your problem, right? And so it's this idea of, i'm
Sister Wenger.
aggressive I'm aggressively doing something toward you, claiming it's my freedom, this is just my right to do this, right? And if you happen to walk into it, it's like, that's your problem. I feel like that's a beautiful encapsulation of our assumption, is that freedom is something somebody's trying to take away from me, is trying to like, corrupt, and I as an individual have to fight and grasp and hold on to it, versus really what we're arriving at, it seems to me, is like freedom is a relaxing into a state of being aware and aligned with what that higher part of us really wants, and also connecting in. So we're like, oh, I don't have to come up with the right answer. I can listen to, like, you're nudging me toward some, okay, cool. Let's let's see what's over there and check it out. But there's so much fighting. I mean, you could probably make the case that every war in written human history, has to some extent been fought around this concept of freedom, or people's assumptions around freedom, right? Like, oh, you're going to come into our land and take our stuff, and then we won't have freedom, so we have to fight you back.
It's about rebellion and control.
Yeah.
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 That's another big point, that the fact that individual freedoms can conflict, because they can, but how can we find the freedom that follows our values, like you were saying as well, and still stick to it in a way that it's interconnected, and not just because I want to rebel against something, or because I'm feeling that I'm being inflicted in some way. Because sometimes, and I had that, I don't know if you ever had that, you might even want the same thing, but just because someone told you to do it, you might feel like, no, I don't want to.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was my whole childhood and teenage and young adult life. I'm still struggling with it. Yeah, that feeling of stubbornness, which is, again, some hurt part rising up and saying, you're not listening to me, you're not taking me seriously, so no matter what you say, I'm going to say and want the opposite and do the opposite. And that is a lack of freedom that we inflict upon ourselves.
Yeah.
And we become embroiled, and we make our whole point of living and purpose about fighting back against somebody else. So we're never in freedom when we do that. And there are, I was talking about things that somebody could take away from me, right? Like being able to go outside. I could absolutely be incarcerated, and somebody could be in charge of when or if I'm allowed to see the sunshine. So there are these, like practical moments where we take away people's freedom. But I think the underlying assumption for me, like the big insight that's coming through, is that if our underlying assumption about freedom is that it's a completely individual experience, and it's about me having to fight everybody else to get it, I think that's going to always be a losing proposition. Versus it's about connecting and then doing what is aligned for me. And also, like, these things we insist on, like, I have to be able to be free to, like, I'm very biased. I think the things that I think are freedom, like sunshine, I'm like, everybody should want those. And other people's freedoms, like, those are weird, but we are increasingly, I think, obsessed with, I need to be able to be free to do whatever I want. And I question how much of that really feels in soul alignment with folks saying that, and how much is a reaction, like a fear reaction, to thinking somebody's coming after you, and somebody is not listening to you and not taking you seriously.
Yeah. And how are you using your freedom? Is it to better yourself and your life, or is it to prove something?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the end of my life. And what a terrifying thought for me it would be to kind of wake up to the fact that I had the freedom all along and I didn't do the things that I wanted, to just be sitting there and going like, oh, did I write the books I wanted to? Did I love the way I wanted to? Did I dance the way I wanted to? Did I show up in joyful expression? And if the answer is no, just realizing, like, I was the only one putting constraints on me. Like, I had the freedom. And so, Spider-Man said it. No, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. I was going to say, with great freedom comes great responsibility. Like, if I have the freedom, it means I'm driving And if I'm not getting to where I want to go, and if I'm not doing the things I want to do, who do I need to complain to? Me.
Yeah. A big insight that I had was when you were saying, I'm not going to remember exactly the phrase, but when you were saying that freedom was also being able to share your love.
Mm.
And I felt that because I feel like sometimes that's all it is. And we might feel limited because there's this side of rebellion, or the feeling of freedom needs to be separating and so on, which ends up limiting our freedom because we feel like to be free I need to be separate, but that's
Yeah.
not what it is.
Or that even the stubbornness, right? Like to be truly free, I have to do it my way versus somebody saying like, hey, why don't you help contribute to this thing? You're like, no, to really be free, it has to just be me doing it the way I want to. Well, don't you actually align with this thing over here? Well, I would if I would let my heart decide. But
Yeah.
as long as I stay in the stubbornness, I just go like, no, I don't want to be part of that because it's not coming from me. And so therefore I'm seeing it as an imposition. And there are a lot of things that are impositions. If we
Yeah.
want to live in community with one another, you're gonna stand in line at a grocery store. It's not gonna always just be your turn. You're gonna have to wait for that sometimes like I'll see a car and it has a sticker on it that says new driver, please be patient,
Yeah.
right? And it's like if we want new people like teenagers, young adults, whoever it is, to be able to like learn to drive safely, we have to have patience to
it,
let them learn.
it actually comes back to the thing that you shared as well with I lost my train of thought, but freedom being oh my god, there was a point in here. It's so weird. It's so weird. What were we talking about? I truly missed the train of thought.
Just
Yeah,
yeah, well, because like what I was talking about.
happiness.
Oh, happiness. Okay, yeah.
Happiness. Because if we, as long as we are doing those control struggles and rebelling against each other to save our freedom, are we truly happy, or are we choosing to be right or to have it our way instead of choosing happiness?
Right, right. So we're often pitting our own happiness and our freedom against one another by insisting that we have to be given, like I have to have the right to do whatever I want. I have to, I'm the kid doing this. I'm just moving my arms like this. If you happen to walk
And it
into,
sounds so funny because that's like basically walking around in fist of anger.
I know I was thinking that as I was doing it. That might not be the move they're doing. It might be, like some other kind of windmill arms, but that's what naturally arose. Oh, this is like waking up so many interesting things in my mind right now. I can't wait to just keep letting it percolate. Yeah. So any insight action that's coming for you that you want to do in conjunction with this?
Feeling the void, not feeling the void, like feeling the void and allowing it to be there in order to listen.
Yeah.
Especially tomorrow with this alignment, and the 3 days after that, starting today, even because we are in a new moon, really making space to just listen and ask, like, what do I want? Like, what is missing in my life? The what feelings are not in alignment? What's the purpose? Those are some of the questions that it's really a time to think, like, what are the dreams that I left behind? What are the things that I came here to do, and I'm not fully in alignment and fully in commitment with those things? What are the values that I'm leaving behind because I'm either too afraid of choosing the freedom of being all of this, or too afraid even of your power, or the losing your freedom or losing your power in whatever ways it is. uh yeah, all the things that are keeping us from the connection and from that
Mhm.
interconnectedness that allows us to be free from a place of alignment and not just be free from a place of I do whatever I want.
Yeah, I think the term rebellion is really helpful. That I mean, it's helpful for me because I know that that is, I know that that's exactly where it's coming from. And you know, the hilarious thing about rebellion is that when we do it, we strengthen whatever we're rebelling against because we take all our energy and we put it toward that thing.
Yeah.
And we grow it. So I'm going to take on that insight action as well. Feeling the void in order to listen. That feels really powerful. And I love that it's kind of a play on words, filling the void versus feeling the void.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And I actually want to. I knew you would love this because we both love word plays, and
Yeah.
that when it came, like, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to share with you and with anyone who listens to it as well is I have been having a hard time listening for quite a long time. You know this, and I'm slowly catching up. And one thing that has been helping quite a lot is the same thing that I mentioned when we're writing. Like, sometimes we need to put the output, like writing our rant before receiving something. I've been doing the same thing with sound because then I can get into the subconscious instead of the conscious mind. So I just starting with humming or any melodies that come, it can be monotone if needed, and letting that output flow until something starts coming. And I leave my phone recording. And I have been getting so many insights this way. I actually been singing like this to plants, and it
Ooh.
feels like it's like I'm singing to them to help them get better. But what is actually happening is like basically they're healing me because they're serving as mirrors. I'm starting to have clarity and insights about things that I wouldn't look in myself, but reflected in them, it's allowing me to activate and move those things.
Oh, I love it. And then it creates a starting point.
Yeah.
So much of the it's so much of the success in this, right? Is like just give me an easy known place to begin and then I can go from there. Oh, that's a big insight for me too. That's really helpful. Is like give me the place to begin and make it very clear what first action I take.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so curious to hear from anybody listening what struck for you, what your insight was. Are you going to take on this insight action of feeling the void in order to listen? Let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Excited to see what comes
Yeah.
after the planetary parade.
I am as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will catch you next time on Insight Club.
Catch you next time.